Hey everyone, it's Carissa at Sprinkled with Glitter. Thanks for stopping by today. Today I have a card project featuring all these fun little goodies that I have here. I'll be using the Reverse Confetti Butterfly Dream Stamp Set. It's one I've actually had in my stash for a little while and I've been wanting to use it. I looked around, it seems to be out of stock everywhere because, of course, it's gorgeous. But I did find one that they released. It's super similar. It's called All Apples, and it would be perfect for Teacher Appreciation Day. So I'll be sure to link that stamp set below as well. And I'll also be using that Concord and Ninth Tree Ring stamp set. So I have my trimmer here. I wanted to show you quickly how to change the blade on this aluminum rail trimmer. It has to be within this blade changing area. So you see that little part that's marked? I actually have the trimmer upside down so that you can see it. If that blade is not within that area, it is impossible to remove that blade. And that's one of the reasons I love this trimmer so much. So I put it between those areas and I can just flick it off, put in my new one, and I'm ready to go. I did do a review and comparison on this trimmer alongside the Wire Guide trimmer, and I'll throw up a card here and link it below in the description so that you can check that video out if you're curious to know more about this trimmer. So I'm starting out with that Concord and Ninth Tree Ring stamp set. I've mounted it on my Mini Misty here, just in case I needed to stamp it again, in case I didn't get a clean stamp the first time. Now, I inked it up with some Avery Elle Fog Pigment ink, and I decided that I probably didn't want it as intense as what this was going to stamp. So I snuck in another A2 size card front and went ahead and stamped this tree ring stamp set onto that. And I can set that aside and use it for another project. And then I removed that piece and stamped it onto the actual card front that I'm going to be using. So I got a nice soft gray image, just enough to put a little bit of texture behind these butterflies that I'm going to be stamping. And I think that tree ring stamp set can be used on so many different types of cards. I love things that are kind of wood grain because it's a really nice neutral pattern that can be used on a lot of styles of cards. So now I have my little butterflies here on my Mini Misty as well, and I am so glad that I used my Mini Misty because you're going to see here that I did not stamp it correctly the first time, but it was no big deal because I went ahead and just, without even re-inking it, just stamped it right back on top. My paper was all the way in the corner when I started out, so I just made sure that paper was still in that corner, pressed it back down, and then I got a perfect stamped image. Now this pigment ink I'm using is gorgeous. It is by Sukanyeko. It is the Radiant Neon, and it is an electric coral. And I wish you could see how bright and beautiful this is in real life. So I wanted to bring in a really bright color palette. It's feeling like spring, and I just felt the need to use some really bright colors. So I went to my little color swatches of my inks that I have, and I pulled out a few other pigment inks. I'm going to do a little pigment ink layering here. So I've started out with the Avery Elle Raspberry Pigment ink, and I'm applying it right around the edge of the stamp, just using a regular old makeup sponge. And you're not going to see much here when I lift up because I didn't get a really intense enough concentration of color. So what I'm going to do is just add a whole nother layer of that raspberry pigment ink around the edge of that stamp and then re-stamp it again. This is where that Mini Misty comes in handy. And you're going to see that I got a really nice shading effect around the edge of that just by layering up those pigment inks. So now I'm going to stamp some of my smaller butterflies. I'm using the Aquamarine ink from Avery Elle as well as the Lemongrass. These are both pigment inks. I get a nice rich color with these pigment inks. And here's a close-up look of that butterfly that I did the shading with. Now on the smaller ones, I didn't do any shading because I wanted this butterfly, of course, to be one of a kind. And so I only wanted that one to have the shading around the edge. So now I've just neutralized a piece of micropore tape by putting it onto the back of my hand, and I'm using the coordinating dies, placing them around the images and holding them in place with that micropore tape. And then I'm going to run it through my Big Shot to cut these out. Now I moved these around because I stamped the smaller images more than once. And I'm going to cut these out, but I'm also using the largest of the butterfly dies. It doesn't coordinate with any of the stamped images, but I'm going to use it to layer behind that butterfly, that one-of-a-kind butterfly. So now I'm taking that vellum butterfly that I cut out using that largest die, and I'm tapping some Versamark ink around the outside edge of it. I decided that I just wanted a little bit of like gold edging around this vellum butterfly. I started by tapping the ink pad directly to the butterfly, but I couldn't get in those smaller grooves. So I just took a little sponge and just applied it around the edge using the sponge. And then I dunked it into my Wow Metallic Gold Sparkle Embossing Powder. And before I heat set it, I cleaned up any of the extra embossing powder that got in places that I didn't want it. And then I went ahead and heat set it. Now, I thought it would be fun to add a cute edge to this card front, so I am using the Pretty Pink Posh Stitch Borders 1 die, and I went ahead and marked the center of it using a Sharpie marker, and then I marked the center of my card front as well, and I'm lining up those 2 tick marks so that I make sure that I get this curve nice and centered. I ran that through my die cut machine, so now I have that really pretty stitched curved edge on my card front. And now I'm using just a little Be Creative tape to attach this top layer butterfly to that vellum piece. I wanted to use a really firm adhesive, but I only wanted it to be stuck down in the middle. So that's why I'm using the Be Creative tape here. And I'll also use the Be Creative tape to attach that vellum butterfly layer onto the card front. Now, once I got this butterfly onto the card front, I went back and added a little bit of the Cool Tack clear foam adhesive behind each of those layers of the large butterfly to keep those wings from getting smushed down and keep that elevation in those wings. And then I'm just going to add on my smaller butterflies using some mini glue dots. Now, I couldn't leave this bright and colorful card without a little bit of black and white striped pattern paper, so I added a little bit of tape runner adhesive along the back side of that card front and then just added a little strip of this black and white pattern paper. And then I grabbed my new scissors here and I'm just trimming off the excess at either end using these. Now, these are the titanium blade Fiskars. They're like the easy action scissors or something like that. I have to tell you, I'm getting used to the action of these scissors because it's a little bit different than what I'm used to, but I do really love them. They give a nice clean cut, smooth cut. So now that my card front's all put together, I'm working on my card base. I am using the white linen cardstock from the Essentials by Ellen Line. I've cut it to 4 1/4 by 11 and then scored it at 5 1/2. And you can see earlier there I had stuck a piece of the fun foam behind that card front, and now I'm just attaching that whole card front onto the card base. Now, I really felt like something was missing, and I couldn't figure out what it was. I went ahead and cut another piece of some Nina Solar White cardstock using that stitched border die, and I'm adding just a little bit of Versamark ink just around the very tip of that. I'm going to end up with a super fine line of this metallic gold sparkle embossing powder. It doesn't even go up to the stitch line. And I went ahead and cleaned it up with my dry brush before I heat set it. And I took it over to my trimmer and just trimmed it down. And I'm going to trim it down even more with my scissors. I just need that little arch. And I've just picked up the edge of that card front that I've already laid down, and I'm just slipping this behind there. And I'm using my Zig 2-way glue pen to adhere this down because it gives me a little wiggle room to kind of push this behind there. And this just gave me a really thin, beautiful, sparkly gold border along that curved edge and really made that curved edge jump out at you. Before it was just kind of white on white and it was kind of getting lost on the card base, but now that really just added that sparkle that it needed. So I finished the card off by adding some sparkling clear sequins from Pretty Pink Posh. I just adhered those on using the multi-medium in the matte finish from Ranger. And here's a look at my finished card project. And I really wish you could see in real life how bright this is because it is a beautiful color combination using that electric coral pigment ink. As always, I will have links to all the products used in this project over at my blog at sprinkledwithglitter.com, where you can see more still shots and find more information. And I will have links to the featured products in the description at YouTube. Thanks for stopping by today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.